Thank you for joining us today. Today we have Mayno Huynh, who is going to present generic drugs, safe, effective, and affordable. He graduated from the Faculty of Pharmacy at the University of Montreal in 2006 and has extensive experience in both community pharmacy and management. He has served as the head pharmacist for multiple pharmacy affiliated with Jean Coutu and Infirmerie Bernier. He's also joined the GSE network in 2013, where he played an active role in developing pharmacy services in both public and private long term care settings. Since 2015, he has been working in the field of specialty drug pharmacy, and he's become a partner at the Laval Pharmacy in 2023, followed by the Quebec City Pharmacy. As a recognized leader, he stands out for his strategic and forward thinking vision of pharmacy with a focus on interdisciplinary collaboration and care optimization. He brings to us today an informed perspective on contemporary issues in the pharmaceutical practice. The setting is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sharon, for the introduction and also the opportunity to speak to the patients today. So, to start off, I have no conflict of interest, personal, professional, with the presentation of today's setting. Um, Perfect. So, here's Mayno. So, let's click on it and start. What are drugs? Generic drugs. So generic drugs match the brand name medication in active ingredients and therapeutic effect. The generic drugs, they might differ in the shape or color due to the inactive ingredients that may differ from a generic brand to the brand medication. But it doesn't include that systematically when there's a generic that they will differ. Sometimes they will be exactly the same. The advantage of generic medication is that generic medication, they usually typically cost about 80 to 85% less than brand name medication. So the generic help reduce the healthcare costs and improve medication access in Canada. How is a generic drug approved in Canada? So Health Canada has a health products and food branch that regulates generic drug approval to ensure safety and quality. The generic drug must show bioequivalence by delivering the same active ingredient amount in the bloodstream and at the same rate, which there's studies that will be done in health volunteers that will compare the pharmacokinetics of brand name medication and generic drugs. What does it mean is that we'll have a brand medication, we'll do blood tests to see how much medication that is in the bloodstream, the rate of it, and the quantity that is delivered. I will do the same tests with a generic brand to show that they are equivalent and that they are similar. When all of these processes have been successful, Health Canada will issue a notice of compliance, and also we call it a DIN, which is a drug identification number that is unique to each medication. Afterwards, Health Canada, there's also high manufacturing standards. So Health Canada requires all generic drug makers to follow the GMP, which is good manufacturing practice for safety and quality. The manufacturers will have tests, they will test the raw materials and also the finished medication, the finished products to meet strict and specifications. Health Canada will perform regular inspections to ensure the compliance and enforce regulations. So they'll do it in the MFG, in the good manufacturing practice in different stages. Also, the drugs will undergo stability tests to guarantee the efficacy and safety throughout the shelf life of the medication. The safety and side effects. So generic drugs, they contain identical active ingredients to ensure the similar therapeutic effects as a brand name medication. Like mentioned earlier, sometimes they may differ in the quantity of the inactive ingredients by the fillers or some dyes, which in some rare cases may have some rare allergic reaction or some intolerance in sensitive individuals, such as lactose, can be common seen inactive ingredients that can differ from brands, and some people that are intolerant to lactose may have some of these type of reaction, which is not an allergic reaction, in some cases more in intolerance. Also, generics undergo strict bioavailability studies that are concerned for the safety and monitoring for the medication by Health Canada. So, what are the common myths? The common myths that we have with generic medication is that generic drugs meet this. They have to meet the same strict safety and quality standards as brand name medication. So generics demonstrate the bioequivalence in delivering the same therapeutic effects as brand name. Also, the common myth is that it's lower costs, so it will be lower quality. But no, they have the same high standards, and it's just that they cost less because they don't need to um, research and develop the medication in any way. Similar to a key. So it costs more to produce a new key to open a door. But if you have a same key and you do copies of the key, then you don't need to, it costs less to do copies. You just need to show that you can open the same door with the copy keys compared to the original key. So that's a common myth where people will say it costs less, so it's less quality, but no, not in medication, and not with generic brands. Some also, like, there's variety, as I mentioned, of the shape and color may differ, but doesn't say that it's less of a quality as brand name medication or has less effectiveness than brand name medication. What are the benefits of generic medication? Well, the medication, they cost about 80 to 85% less than brand name medication, which can increase affordability for patients, and also the lower cost will help patients adhere to the treatments, improving overall health results. And the generic drug has saved billions of dollars in the past decade in the health system for Canada. How can we identify a generic medication? Usually, generic drugs, generic brands, they will use the chemical names rather than brand names to identify the product, the medication. So at the pharmacy level, you'll see the name that is more the scientific one, the chemical one. Let's say for cholesterol, Lipitor, you'll have that will be the brand name, and you'll have atorvastatin, which is the chemical name that will help identify what is a brand and what is a generic. Also, the packaging, usually generic brand, they will lack distinctive branding on the boxes. So you'll have visual less marketing on generic brands compared to the brand name industry or the brand name medication. Also, if you have any question, the pharmacist will provide any guidance. Usually, we have some stickers that we put on the labels that will identify when we have a switch of brand in the dispense. So they have some green labels or blue labels that will help identify when there's a change of brand when we distribute our medication. Did you know that there are several Canadian generic brands manufacturing that are in Canada? We have like Apotex, PharmaScience, Gem Pharma, Sandoz Canada, Laboratoire Riva, Product, and several more that are uh, Canadian manufacturers that produce generic medication in Canada. They have some manufacturing plants in Canada also. They are mainly usually seen in Ontario and in Quebec. Generic industry is an important motor for the Canadian economy. The generic pharmaceutical industry employs approximately 11,000 Canadians in highly skilled positions like in manufacturing, life science, and technology. When should you consult a pharmacist? You should consult a pharmacist when you have questions that arise with medication. Like, example, when there's a brand to generic switch. Um, Also, inform your pharmacist when you do have allergy reaction or an unexpected side effect. It can be diarrhea, nausea that usually you don't see, and then it's new and you're not sure. Always consult a pharmacist can help you in that sense. Also, the pharmacist will provide evidence-based advice to confirm that generic drugs are effective, and they will monitor the safety and efficacy during the medication use. It is important to have an open communication with pharmacists to foster trust and improve quality and promote safe use of medication. So remember to mention any changes to your medication, if you just need different natural products, over-the-counter medication, or vaccines to your pharmacist that will help dissociate what is what of if a side effect will occur or if there's a potential interaction if something changed recently. There are several resources for patients. Health Canada has a website that can give you information on the process of generic medication and also explain the regulatory standards for the pharmaceutical industry. There's also a Canadian Generic Pharmaceutical Association that also provides data on the cost savings and the role of the generics in healthcare. Of course, you have your healthcare providers, such as your pharmacists, that are well respected in the medication management in the healthcare team. And you have some patient association like the CPFF that can also give you some data to support and help you navigate your patient journey. Any questions?
I just want to ask you, Minnow. So, as you know, in Canadian pulmonary fibrosis, our patients have a rare disease, and the drug that they're currently on, most pharmacists don't understand. So, when they become generic, does that mean more pharmacists will have a better understanding of how the drug works? And if they go into a regular pharmacist, that they'll be able to buy it?
It's a good question, Sharon. We've seen a switch in our environment where a brand and generic switch occurred in several different type of medication. So I don't think it's really the generic. It's more on the access of how the PSP is managed, which the pharmaceutical. This is something that we didn't address, specifically because for specialty medication, they are the patient support programs and how they manage and how they will give services. So we've seen it's quite new in the last 5 years, I would say, and there are some manufacturers that see the benefits and the importance of the patient support on that side. And we've seen some shifts of having more pharmacists that are more informed with generic. But I cannot say that it's directly to the generic switch, but more on the ongoing of the PSP uh, adaptation with the generic coming up on the market.
Okay. So I guess, one of the things that I know our community is always concerned about is that they had the patient support programs in place always when they took this drug because there's a lot of side effects with the two current drugs on the market.
Mhm.
And with them going to a generic form, you're saying that the generic drug manufacturers now understand that they also have to have a patient support program, a PSP, that they're going to continue the same things that was always been provided before.
I think that we've seen the last couple of years a better understanding of the manufacturers of generics on that part. So yes, I see there's a shift and there are some manufacturers that are late to see that key element in the patient journey. And it was quite an adaptation when the first generics came out. in specialty medication, uh, but that I've seen like 5 years ago. And now, recently, we've seen a better understanding from the industry, and that are also investing similarly to the patient support program. Because before, I would say 5 years ago, they would just say, "Oh, it's a copay management. That's a PSP," but it goes above and beyond than just the copay management. So yes, I believe that, and we've seen with recent some brands have that vision of investing also a certain amount in that PSP services.
Okay, so because it's going to become generic, the two drugs that currently our community relies on, does that mean that the specialty pharmacist will provide a generic brand and then provide the same support that these individuals have received in the past, and how to manage their side effects, or if they have some kind of difficulties with it combining with another drug that they're taking? Is that what you're looking at? Because I'm thinking that they still wouldn't go to a regular pharmacist in your neighborhood, right?
Hmm. Yeah, there's some that will go to. I think it all depends on the patient's needs and according to where they're at in their therapy and their situation. So yes, there will be more community pharmacy, traditional community pharmacy that will have more experience based with their pool of patients and also interest as a pharmacist. But you're correct where in our setting where we have continued to support the patient from brand to generic as a specialty pharmacy to support these patients to manage the side effects and also manage the gaps when there's coverage issue and when there's travelings and things like that. And we can also have we're usually a good person that helps the patient in navigating of what resources are available for them. Is JAMP giving X and Y services? Does Apotex give Z and E? So we help also manage. We have a better understanding of what is available to the patient by the PSP, uh, set up by the pharmaceutical. I think this will be something that will have a change and have a better understanding where before you have one brand, have one PSP, so you have one choice of
Mhm.
PSP, and now you'll have multiple choices of because they'll have multiple generic brands, and each brand will have their services and their differences. So we'll give more
Okay.
choices to patients.
Okay. So a lot of people are concerned because we are a rare disease. There's not a lot of us. There's only about
Yeah.
30,000 across Canada. So does that mean if it becomes generic, does that mean more people will have access to this drug? Because before you had to
Hmm.
determine, if
Yep.
you qualified, and so a lot of people weren't bad enough to qualify. So does that mean now, if your doctor thinks that it could prevent you from getting worse, they could prescribe the drug rather than wait until you are worse to prescribe the drug?
Hmm. That's a good call out. We believe that they will help to have more access because that's one of the key element of generics is to give more access since the barrier of cost is lower. So yes, I believe that could be an option. It will be provincially because it's the medication list is provincial. So I believe that of course this could give the opportunity to patient that has, like you mentioned, uh, a milder state in their disease or an earlier stage in the disease to have access to these medication because when the brand listed it's 75-80% more costly, so pharmacoeconomics kicks in and they'll accept the barrier to access will be lowered due to the reduced cost. So hopefully we can have more access to patients with the generics coming out. We hope that the decision key players
Okay. And then I'm
will review
confused
that.
for,
Yeah.
for the So for the doctors who prescribe this drug, because previously when it's branded, they have to fill out a special form to get it reimbursed through the
Yep.
formulary and everything. So will the doctors have to do the same thing with a generic drug?
Yes, that didn't change, unfortunately, with the reduced costs. Most province has the same, kept the same um, criterias. But hopefully, when they'll have more data, because it's been only 5 years where the first generic that I've know of came to Canada, um, the launches of generics have been increasing the past couple of years. So we've seen the next couple of years coming up, having more generics coming up in specialty medication. I think they'll have more data, and that will help to review those barriers, especially with I don't in the healthcare, a lot of we have less time, less resources for healthcare in the physicians to fill out all these admin. So we've seen a shift in provincial criterias where they reduces the paperwork because they know that we have to do more with less. So I think this could be in the near future something that can be reviewed where they'll have less formality to fill out. But right now we're still at the same stage of a brand, even if it's generic, the physician has to fill out and have to do the same test for now.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit more when you were talking earlier about the fillers? Some people
Hmm.
were concerned, like when you said, they'd use different fillers, although the
Yeah.
molecule is a biosimilar, it's the same drug, but they make it in a different way. Can you explain that a little further?
Yeah, we've seen some when there's a generic, uh, the filler can be different according to the manufacturer. The filler can be like I've mentioned quickly, lactose usually to fill out. So it's the inactive ingredients. So you have the active ingredients where that's the molecule that will have an effect in our system that will target the disease. But to complete the pill or the capsule, they usually will add some fillers like lactose, and some will use some dyes, and some won't use dyes. So that can be seen because with brand in the brand industry, we see marketing strategy that is a bit more important than a generic because the generic they focus more on copying. They don't need to convince people or convince the that this is a good medication to use. So uh, you only have patient already on it. You have proof of concept is already done. So that's why what we've seen is generic to how they can reduce the manufacturing costs is they don't focus as much in the marketing strategy and focus more on the uh, medication itself. So people that I know your earlier question you had, how can I know that I have some intolerance or allergy to inactive ingredients? Usually, as viruses, we've seen it with patient that has history in their past, in their previous lives with before the switch of brand to generic, where they will have food intolerance to lactose, so milk, dairy, they aren't able to take those. They usually they'll take lactose-free products because they'll have more GI, gastrointestinal gases, bloating, diarrhea, soft stools due when they take dairy products. So we have that, and we've seen that there's some tricks when you know that in your dietary habits where we can give some lactate or lactase to help if there's no manufacturer that avoid lactose. So that can be something that can be seen and a trick. And also the dyes, like the yellow dyes, it's more the classic one where we'll have seen patients when they were younger, if they take the banana um, penicillin, amoxicillin, that have some intolerance, vomiting, thing like that we've been associated. So for now we're still on the history and doing links and trying it's trial and error. So when we see that it's not because vomiting is not an allergy reaction, it's more intolerance. and also rashes. If it occurs multiple days afterwards, then we've implemented the new medication. We call it more a late allergy reaction, so it's more an intolerance. You can manage it, and not a confirmed significant allergy reaction when you have hives, when you have the first or second dose that you've taken. So that's more with the history of the patient that we're able to figure out. So having experience, having a pharmacist that have experience with these type of medication and these type of switches, they will have also the reflexes to go see the product monograph and look at the non-active ingredients and compare to see if there's some uh, ingredients that are different between the brand and the generic company.
Okay. Someone wanted to ask about the time release
Yeah.
because when you take heart medication, time release is very important about how it releases the medication. So for this
Mhm.
drug, what would be the difference between the generic and the brand name? Like, is it the same for the time release of the dosage, or would it
Yeah.
be slightly different?
Yeah. Usually in the process of approval with Health Canada, they will do, like I mentioned, the test in healthy patients, the kinetics of the medication. Well, we're gonna have that graph to see how much drug is in our bloodstream. So they'll do multiple tests and testing with our blood to see what's the graph of how much medication is released in our bloodstream, the total, and also the time. So depending of the medication, luckily in CPFF, well, in PFF medication, PF medication, there's less importance in the timing of the peak or the release of the medication compared to other, like you said, in heart disease, or even in children in the attention disorder, where we see that time has an importance in the effectiveness of the medication. So in the two right now that are available, they are not time sensitive in the release of medication. But the graphs I've seen for the generic are very similar.
Okay. I was just going to say, if anybody has any other questions, put them in the chat room. That'd be great. One of the other question was, when you say the manufacturing of generic drugs are mostly concentrated in Ontario and Quebec, does that mean all the materials come from our two provinces, or do they have to get imported?
There's a tendency where they are creating also the raw ingredients locally, especially with COVID, when it came and the chain of supply has been disrupted with COVID. There is a tendency of having more locally produced, but you're correct. We are still a global system where we all depend with each other. But there's some plants that I've seen that they are producing their active ingredients. They're not producing 100% of everything in Canada, but there's a shift coming up to make sure that we are more prepared in case of a next situation where the supply chain will be less effective, we're less dependent, especially with Trump coming up also and things like that in the States. So there's a shift in the industry, but you're correct. We're still depending in raw ingredients, and some products are still produced in Asia or Indonesia or India.
So someone wanted to ask, you're saying that you can produce it cheaper because you're just paying for the raw materials. You didn't have to pay for the clinical trials or the testings, and that's the only difference. Because if you're importing all these ingredients, isn't it the same ingredients that the brand name would have used as well?
Well, most of the cost of a brand, it's research and development. So R&D is a big investment in developing a new medication. That's why the generic doesn't have to do a lot of R&D, where they have stage one, two, three, and then it didn't meet the criteria. They didn't meet the expected result, so they have to drop the medication. So they have They have put in a lot of R&D money, millions of dollars in products that are not to market. So the
Okay.
generic, that's the big difference in the cost savings is the R&D. They don't have a lot of losses of R&D products that are not going to market that the brand has to support, and also to how you did a study that showed the benefits, and now you have to get the word, and you have to train the physicians, trains the healthcare, and have that sales force kind of
Yeah.
on the market. You don't need those sales force compared when you're a generic brand compared to an originator.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you very much for today's presentation because, as you know, the two current drugs in Canada are going to go generic by the end of this year.
Yeah.
And so, this is why CPFF brought forward and invited Minot to explain what generic drugs are. And I'm
Hmm.
sure in the coming months, we'll probably be calling you back for some more advice and some
Hmm.
insight because this is the first time in our community that drugs have gone and become generic, right? They've
Yeah.
always been brand name. And so
Hmm.
some of us are a little nervous because we're not sure how we're going to access it and how is the processing going to be, given the fact that there was always patient support programs, the PSPs, and in
Hmm.
helping us to stay on the drug, to deal with the
Yeah.
side effects and everything.
Yeah. Well, to reassure the patients in Quebec, it's been more than 2 years that one of the two generic medication that have been generalized in Quebec and has an obligation switch. So, and patient weren't affected by that. So they are experienced. So you're not alone. Um, if you feel that you have to switch, just to reassure the people online is that you're not alone, and there have been switches, and also in all other disease too. So and we've seen the switch of patients that were on brand in generic, and we supported them, and when there's gap of coverage, the manufacturer was there also to support the patient in that to have the less drug stop therapy stop due to coverage. So to reassure patients online, the industry generic it's not new for one of the two medication that is on the market right now.
Okay. And hopefully the same thing for the patient support programs, because that's really important because
Yeah.
patients in our community need a lot of support to stay on the generic drugs to take effect because they have side effects, right?
Hmm. Yes, of course, and the pharmacist you has a key role, and I think as a patient, I think one of the key element is ask question. Don't be shy. The pharmacists are there for that, and don't be shy to ask a different type of pharmacies too to have a well informed choice. So yeah,
Okay.
don't
Well, thank you
go
very
ahead.
much. And we look forward to having another conversation with you in the new year as we approach the generic drug market. Because, as I said, by the end of this year, both drugs will be generic. And as you indicated, the other one has been generic for 2 years, and the switchover has been pretty good. So we're hoping for another smooth ride. So thank you very much for
My
coming
pleasure.
on today. Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me. Thank you.